Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 13, Episode 90. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here this Monday, Steelers Nation. And Dave Bryan, very nice to be back with you. You're back from your vacation out there to San Diego. Hopefully you had a great time, and welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thanks. Good to be back and all. A little time away. I have problems forcing myself to kind of throttle down a little bit there, but I was able to do it for a couple of days there. Took some tours of San Diego, got to see a minor league hockey game, something I haven't done in a while, and went to the zoo, and we found a place that has some great seafood, which is hard to do these days, especially out on the West Coast. Able to do that, and the drive wasn't too terribly bad, about five and a half hours, but back, you always try to pick the perfect time to leave, during the offseason. There's not, thanks to the NFL calendar, that's extremely hard to do. And right after the Super Bowl seems to be the most ideal time. But even so, there was still some news. The news never stops. And you guys had to cover a couple of things while I was gone. I know you talked about one of them with John Mitchell retiring with Josh Carney, and thanks to him for sitting in on a couple episodes as well too. And we had some a little bit of news break yesterday that'll probably have us just in discussion today as well too.
The news overall has been quiet. It was generally a very quiet week for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but the news that is there is coaching. And so we'll get your thoughts on the John Mitchell retirement here a little bit later in the show. But the news of the day right now is that reportedly Aaron Curry will become the Steelers' new outside linebackers coach. That report came in Sunday evening. If you look at Aaron Curry's bio on Twitter, it says Steelers linebackers coach. And so although it's not been made official by the Pittsburgh Steelers, it's been essentially made official by Aaron Curry himself, and that should be a familiar name, former first-round pick of the of the Seattle Seahawks, I should say, back in what that was 07, 09, somewhere around there. He's been coaching with Seattle for a couple seasons now, and now appears to be headed to Pittsburgh, and so that is, I guess, in some sense, the Brian Flores replacement. Although Flores was coaching off-ball linebackers, Curry seems to be more of the edge guys. Outside linebackers, we're not entirely sure what the exact fit is going to be, but that makes the most amount of sense. So what's your what are your quick thoughts and initial takeaways on Aaron Curry?
Yeah, where's the time gone for starters? 2009 first round draft pick. What was that, out of Wake Forest, I believe? And obviously career didn't go like a lot of people thought it might there, and quickly he saw the writing on the wall and transitioned into coaching once his NFL careers had ended. He's only, I think he's going to be 37 here pretty soon, so fairly young hire here. And obviously with Flores going out the door to Minnesota, and John Mitchell retiring. I think you had a tweet earlier in the week about, boy, the Steelers coaching staff sure is thin, and by thin you don't mean needing to eat either. So I think the writing was on the wall a little bit that there was going to be an addition or two to the coaching staff this offseason. This was kind of out of off the radar kind of hiring, if you will, but it does make a lot of sense once you start drilling down into it. And as you mentioned, been working with the edges over there. I guess more in an assistant role with Seattle. Comes off of a season where they've had a couple of their edge rushers have really good years. And who is it? Owosu, the kid that was out of USC, and who was the other one? Who was the other edge over there that they had 9.5 sacks this season? was it
the Tennessee kid?
Yeah.
Taylor, what was his name? Let me look it up here real quick for you. It was Darrell Taylor.
Yeah, Darrell Taylor. Yeah, both of those guys had significant amount of sacks uptick this past season there. So look, I mean, you're looking for a young coach that can work with position group on the outside, and we don't know for sure that that's going to be his role, but it sure lines up with his past experience and obviously his playing days and all like that. And how nice is it to come in and say, okay, you're in charge of outside linebackers. Here's TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. See if you can do something with these two. Well, a lot of clapping. Good job. But obviously you would expect, that outside linebacker room to look a little bit different from a depth standpoint once you get past guys like Watt and Highsmith this season. And as you smartly pointed out already, there's a link back to really with Curry and the University of Charlotte, right? And right. Larry Ogunjobi is familiar with Curry, and I think Alex Highsmith, his early 2000. What would have been 19 or 18?
No, his first 3 years, I think, until 2019. Curry was at Charlotte, and working, near Alex Highsmith.
All right, well there you go. So they, those two will obviously be familiar with each other. We'll see what happens. Obviously, Larry Ogunjobi is an interior defensive line player and set to be an unrestricted free agent this offseason. Don't know how much of impact the addition of Curry will have on that. Usually money is the big thing that makes the impact there. But outside of that, I mean, I don't know much of I struggle in trying to find a link back to, Tomlin and Curry overall, although you go back several years ago to some press conferences, and when Curry was a player, Mike Tomlin having, a few nice things to say about Curry. But outside of that, I don't know if there's much of a link there. This just sounds like, Curry kind of an up-and-comer in the coaching ranks. I know he went through the Bill Walsh diversity coaching program that had him see a little bit of time, I think, with Carolina and Cincinnati before he landed with the Seahawks over there. It sounds like the Seahawks are pretty, from the most part, at least from a beat writer and, some blogger aspect, that Curry's considered a loss from their coaching staff when it comes to that. So some new young blood in the room and interesting hire. And once again, one of those ones that you really didn't kind of see coming, right?
Right. Somebody much funnier than me on Twitter made the joke of, if you're a former first-round pick, you will find your way to Pittsburgh, like it or not. You will come to Pittsburgh by player or by coach. And I just think back, when I think about Aaron Curry, the phrase that always gets stuck in my mind was he was billed as the safest player in that 2009 draft out of Wake Forest, and a lesson that there really is no such thing in safe players. Now, he was not a terrible player, but he never justified the 5th overall pick that he was. But putting all that aside, him as a coach, there isn't a whole lot out there about him. I found couple of clips from a leadership session that I'm going to kind of go through maybe later today on him, but we'll see what the division of labor looks like. I know that, basically since Joey Porter's been gone, Carl Dunbar, the D-line coach, and Denzel Martin, his assistant, have worked with the Steelers outside linebackers because they're effectively defensive linemen. They drop into coverage, less than 10% of the time. And so that's been the way that they go through practice. And so it appears that Jerry Osavsky will return to kind of full-time work as the inside linebackers coach. Curry's going to work with the edge guys, and then Dunbar will, work with the true defensive linemen, the big guys up front, the Cam Haywards, Isaiah Loudermilks, etc. And so maybe they're going to divide that labor up a little bit to get more specific attention. They did that with Porter, I guess. So they're kind of returning that to that now with Aaron Curry. So what the connection there is with Tomlin and Curry, it's hard to say. Were they at that Wake Forest Pro Day way back when? Maybe we can try to check that. I'm sure there's been interactions over the years and, at different combines and pro days, and who knows. There's probably some story that Mike Tomlin has to tell, but it seems like it's an up-and-comer, as you said, and a pretty quality hire.
Yeah, well, I would imagine Denzel Martin probably stays more in an assistant role.
Yeah, he's listed as the assistant outside linebackers coach, basically Carl Dunbar's right-hand man. Maybe he becomes more of a help to Curry.
Okay, so we'll see if they have any more additional hires. You wrote something about a couple of days ago here about if the Steelers did add, another coach to the offensive side of football, then it's easy to draw the lines back to a Byron Leftwich.
Yeah, I thought Josh and I had a really good conversation on Friday, and he kind of convinced me of if you're gonna, and I'm not advocating necessarily for Byron Leftwich. I know he's coming off a really turbulent year in Tampa Bay, but if you wanna throw out their one name, because so many fans and other blog sites have thrown out every name under the sun, including ones that were so pie in the sky they had no chance of happening, like Eric Bieniemy, and now he's the official OC in Washington. But I think Leftwich makes sense because he's having a hard time finding a job. He could have that maybe assistant head coach label to kind of replace John Mitchell. There's obviously the connection there between Tomlin and Leftwich. So I'm not saying it's going to happen, not saying that I am dying and pounding the table for it to happen. But just logically, if you're asking me, if you made me choose one name that theoretically could be that senior offensive assistant type of role, I think Leftwich, has all the dots to connect.
Right, and it could be a situation along the lines of, I just don't want that guy to sit out there,
right.
Viewpoint from Tom. Has Pep Hamilton landed anywhere yet?
He has not. I know that some Colts guys said it sounded like that was a logical landing spot. I think Hamilton makes some level of sense too, but yeah, I think he's still seeing what else is out there, especially with Indy.
All right. So obviously you're getting close to the annual NFL Combine. And look, we've seen things, hires last on into the latter part of February where we're at about right now. So if they were to add, obviously we expect the Aaron Curry news to drop officially either today or tomorrow from the Steelers. And you would think that if they were going to go the route of a guy like Byron Leftwich, in addition, we should probably know that by the end of the week as well, too, wouldn't you think?
Well, maybe after the combine, because that's when everyone gets together, every coach and agent and all that kind of stuff. And so maybe those conversations can take on some different form there. I still expect this team to add at least one more coach to, at the very least, replace Blaine Stewart as either assistant wide receivers coach / special teams assistant to Danny Smith. Stewart wore a lot of hats. And so I'm expecting at least one more hire. Will we see more than that? Then we'll just have to kind of wait on anything above an additional hire.
All right. So we'll sit here patiently and see if anything breaks along those lines.
Right. But as we mentioned, John Mitchell retiring last Wednesday. And so I know that Josh and I discussed it on the Friday show, but you and I have not discussed it. And what a coach, what a life, what a legacy. I know he's been in that more reduced kind of liaison role since 2018 when Carl Dunbar became the D-line coach, but Mitchell still had an on-field presence and certainly had an impact on this organization for 29 years. And so I know you're a big fan of John Mitchell, all that he accomplished and all that he meant to this Pittsburgh Steelers franchise. Yeah,
look, sometimes it comes to, at some point it comes to an end and they move on, right? On with post-football life. And Lord knows he's been around football for most of his life there. I tell you, just, you can't help but think about when you think about John Mitchell, especially during his time with the Steelers, about we constantly go back to his instruction of, boy, you better be running after the football. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things every time I think about John Mitchell, things that have come up over the years of one primary coaching aspect of his was, you better be chasing down the football. And it's interesting to read back some of the things that, like Aaron Smith has said, and, trying to hide from John Mitchell at times. And, you go back to some of those, most recent Super Bowl teams, and I'm sure nothing bad said from the likes of Aaron Smith and Brett Kiesel and Casey Hampton and some of those guys. And obviously, fast forward into the Cameron Hayward years and along those lines. So, man, that guy has seen a lot of football during his years, obviously dating all the way back to college time, and how historically being part of the Alabama program years ago. So, you didn't know exactly when it was going to happen, when he was going to step away and retire, but you had to know in the back of your head that day was coming, and that day is now. So just tip your cap to him for the time that he put in with the Steelers all those years.
And I wrote a quick film room on just some of those hustle plays, my favorite hustle plays by some of the defensive linemen. Not an exhaustive list, but just a couple that back through my timeline and stuff that I remembered of Aaron Smith in Super Bowl 40, running down Sean Alexander 20 yards downfield, to some of the great effort and hustle plays by Cam Hayward and Stephon Tuitt. To me, two of the best effort defensive linemen of the last decade, 20 years. Just those guys play all out, Hayward especially. And so those are all the teachings of John Mitchell, who taught so many great players, all your favorite defensive linemen of the post-Steel Curtain era, essentially, whether you're talking Casey Hampton, Aaron Smith, Brett Kiesel, Stephon Tuitt, Cam Hayward, Javon Hargrave. I remember Hargrave, as soon as they drafted him, Mitchell came out and said something to the effect of, talented guy, good player, got to run the ball, got to teach him to run the football. That, as you said, was always the teaching point there, always the point of emphasis. So, the question now becomes, will they replace that title of assistant head coach? What do you think they do there? Would that be an internal thing? A Dunbar potentially? Would that be an external thing? What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, I don't know which way they're going to go with it. I don't, do you need a senior, kind of right-hand man, I guess, for Tomlin? I guess we're going to find out. I mean, it obviously could go either way here in regard to that. Obviously, Dunbar is one of the more senior guys on the staff. So you would think if they were going to add a title to somebody, it would probably be Dunbar.
Now, I will say this. I know that when Terrell Austin was first brought in, his first couple years before becoming DC, he was basically a game day guy that helped Tomlin from the booth with, challenges, in clock management, those types of things. I believe Brian Flores had that role last year. I don't know who would have that role for 2023. So if you want maybe an assistant head coach, I know what Mitchell did with some off-field type stuff, but maybe you could have somebody that would have that lens and carry that title, and that would be a game day type thing, because I don't know who on this coaching staff would be maybe somebody that would help Tomlin out on Sundays in terms of some of the in-game management. I don't know if there's that kind of guy. So that's why, another reason why I suggest Leftwich, because I think he could potentially help Tomlin and Pittsburgh in that regard.
Okay. Well, we'll have to see how that all plays out in the next couple weeks here.
Right. But again, I'm still expecting at least one. And Leftwich would not replace a Blaine Stewart in that kind of role. It would be a younger guy, I assume, somebody that may be from the college ranks or some other, who knows where, but it wouldn't be a Leftwich type. So I'm expecting at least one more coaching hire. But even if they hire one more coach, they'll be sitting at, I think, 18 total. We're just going to be a very small coaching staff.
All right.
But we'll see. Let's see what else we have here. I know I have an article today about the problem with Cam Sutton, and I've discussed this on the podcast, and I kind of wanted to turn it into article form to get maybe some reader impact and feedback there. And then, so I won't talk about it too much, but just going back to the idea of I'm a big Cam Sutton fan. I do want to re-sign the guy. It's just that thought that I can't stop thinking about, that you pay this guy, upwards of $14 million per year, which to me is like number one corner type money. But is he truly that number one corner? And if you pay him, do you still feel like we have to go draft somebody to be that top flight corner on our team? That's kind of to me, the trickiness when it comes to Cam Sutton.
Look, what his market value is during free agency here is obviously going to be something fun to watch. And he is, made it clear that he would like to remain in Pittsburgh. And the whole thing where I have estimated his market value being in that, 13, high end around 13, maybe 14 million at max is all relative to cornerbacks around the league and what they're getting paid, along with the fact that the whole supply and demand thing. I think I've made that clear over the last couple of weeks that's why I have his market value where it is. Ideally, would you love to have the guy back at 8 or 9 million? Sure, absolutely. But if he's allowed to hit free agency, there's going to be some interest in him, you would think, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah, 100%. And again, he brings so much value for the versatility. He had a career year in 2022. And to me, he's been really underpaid the last 2 seasons. And he kind of got caught that new deal in that 2020 season when the cap reduced and the voidable years had to be put in. Probably not a good time to be asking for a new contract. And so, I think certainly he deserves every cent that he gets. To me, let me just put it this way. Let's say you pay him 13.5, 14 million. How do you not have this guy shadow a top receiver, Jamar Chase, whoever the top receiver the opponent is? How do you pay that guy a record amount of money for Pittsburgh Steelers in cornerback history and then have him just play aside?
Yeah, I mean, look, and it really goes along the lines too. If you spend a first-round draft pick on a kid, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna have Sutton not shadow and potentially spend a first-round pick on a cornerback, and you're gonna pay this guy $14 million. That's just the issue I have. I'm not saying I don't want to pay him. If it takes paying this guy $13-14 million, I'll probably do that because I think losing him would be so consequential. But that's just the point I'm trying to make is you're paying him that kind of money. Are you going to actually use him and employ him in that $14 million value though? But
look, he's also a movable chess piece kind of player too, where you can move him around anyway, slot wherever,
But
where do you become more where's the price point where you become more comfortable of him not shadowing? Is that where it comes down to? Is there a $4 million difference in, okay, well, we paying him $4 million less than I don't expect him to have to shadow.
Yeah, if I could wave a magic wand, I would say 10 to 11 million I'd be a lot more comfortable at. And maybe I know the market is the market, and I talked about what Charvarius Ward got last year in San Francisco, and it is hard to see Sutton want to take less than that, but we have seen Steelers take less before. Ramon Foster, remember one of those really team-friendly deals. Sutton is a guy that I think truly wants to stay in Pittsburgh, likes being in Pittsburgh, likes being coached by Mike Tomlin, kind of is that introspective guy. Maybe money doesn't mean everything to him, and 10, 11 million is still going to be double what he's been, getting on that last contract. So if you pay him 14 million, you play that guy in the slot. If you pay a guy 14 million, that's outside money to me. That's not go cover the slot receiver type money.
Yeah, but then again, there's the whole market value is the market value too.
Sure.
So,
no, absolutely.
Look, my whole look at what his market value is once again is based on the position. What guy? Look, you're going to have guys off that list here pretty soon. William Jackson III, $13.5 million average yearly value. He's coming off that list. What's going to happen with Marcus Peters? Guy like him. You could probably 2 or 3 others on this list. We'll see what happens to those guys. But you have guys around the league and Stephon Gilmore with the Colts, 10 million, and Stingley with the Texans at 8.6. There becomes a point where Sutton's looking at it and said, well, damn, I'm better than that guy.
Sure.
Charvarius Ward is a prime example. Let's even look at maybe Shaquille Griffin. We don't know what's going to happen with him. 28 years old, 13.333 million average yearly value with him. I mean, that obviously that you're looking at this at several different aspects. You're looking at what's happening around him, and you're looking at what are the guys. The supply and demand aspect of it when it comes into free agency here,
Right. No, I agree. But I will say Pittsburgh has always found a way to get guys a bit cheaper than you think. Deontay Johnson came in with a pretty team-friendly type deal. I'll go back to Ramon Foster, but let's just assume it's $14 million for Cam Sutton. He gets real market value. Is he going to be just one side cornerback, not going to shadow, still going to go draft a first-round corner? It doesn't line up in the sense of you're going to pay this guy all this money and not use him the way that he's getting paid.
I guess the counter argument to that would be, what happens if you just don't get this guy re-signed?
Right. No, and I write that in the article. And again, I want to make it clear. I want to re-sign Cam Sutton. I would love to do it for 10 or 11. If it costs me 13, 14, I'm not going to let a couple million be the reason why I lose Cam Sutton because he is so valuable. And if you lose him, then you have an extreme major hole there. I mean, so I'm not trying to say don't sign Cam Sutton. I'm just saying it's a bit awkward to me,
right?
For the reasons that I laid out.
I'm just saying, I would just say the counter argument to what you're talking about on the sides would be, well, you might not have him at all,
Right. But is that, is that the good enough reason? Because you could say that for any free agent. Yeah, it's tough to replace any guys you're going to lose. If you're going to pay him, though, he's an outside corner. He's shadowing top receivers. And he's doing that on a weekly basis.
I mean, ideally, once again, you'd like to have this guy back around 10 million, right?
Yeah.
But I think if you looked at a realistic viewpoint of what's going on in the market versus, the rise in cap and, that kind of thing. And I just, that's why I have, based on the supply and demand and looking at what's going on around him. That's why I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of, there is a aspect of it too, is how much is too much,
Sure.
And, I think you get up, you talk about anything north of 14 million, you're kind of in that, is he worth that? But I think up until then, anything, as I've stated, anything between 10 and 13 and a half is really the more realistic aspect of it.
I agree. But again, let's say it's 13 and a half, 14 million. Is he going to be a slot guy? Can you justify paying a guy 14 million and moving him inside?
He needs to be on the field. I'll tell you that.
Oh, yeah, but there's different aspects to covering, a number one receiver on 3rd and 10 versus dropping into a hook zone from your dimebacker spot or inverting to play the deep third, as opposed to, manning up against their top corner or top receiver. And so that just, when you pay a guy that amount of money, this is how teams think. When you pay a guy that amount of money, you got to get your value out of him. And to me, there's certain requirements that almost come along with paying a guy that amount of money.
All right. And then look, I mean, I'm sure he would tell you that he's obviously up for the challenge. Should that be what's asked of him,
Right. Yeah. And I think he's a really good corner coming off a really good year, but is he that upper echelon guy that, should shadow a receiver? Is he good enough to justify taking on that top guy consistently? I don't know if he's quite at that level. I think he's just a notch below. I'm a big Cam Sutton fan. He's improved so much. Again, all the value he provides, but is he that true number one corner? I think he's just short of that mark.
All right. Well, I mean, look, we fully expect him to get re-signed. It's just how much.
Yeah, I conclude by saying I think he will be back in Pittsburgh, and I really want to see what those numbers are. If it can be a little bit lower than maybe what these market projections are, fantastic. If it's not, then how will Pittsburgh use him? Will that role change? Will he be a little more static and really just truly be an outside corner? That'll be something I'll be watching for very closely in 2023.
All right.
All right, Dave, XFL, the NFL is done, but professional football is not. And so the XFL, which last played in 2020 and then shut down due to COVID and then reopened under new management, highlighted by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. They came back this weekend. I know you were on vacation. I didn't watch a ton of it. I watched a little bit here and there, mostly just for Steelers interest. You got a couple of former Steelers players coaching in Hines Ward and Rod Woodson. Ward had a heartbreaking loss in his coaching debut. Had some former players playing, highlighted by Martavis Bryant, who had just a couple of catches for the Vegas Vipers on Saturday. So any thoughts on the XFL coming back in their first season in a couple of years, and any takeaways, Dave? Yeah,
the most that I was able to watch was after I got home yesterday and able to watch that night game, which was really ended up being pretty entertaining between, who was it, Seattle and Washington. Some of the rules I think are very, very attractive. I like how they handle so quickly with the with the reviews and all like that. I love the 1, 2, and 3 point extra point designation. We saw how I saw in the highlights and all like that, how, what was it? The St. Louis team was able to score, was it like 15 points in the last 2-something minutes. And,
right. They had the 4th and 15 onside kick, quote unquote, conversion.
Right. I like that. There are some aspects of that game that they're doing that I think the NFL really needs to take a lot closer look at, for sure. And, I think, the biggest thing is, extra points have become, especially kicking extra points, I don't know, I guess it depends on the team, have become so given type situations that why not eliminate just a flat out extra point aspect of the kicking extra point and make it where teams do have to have a choice at 1, 2, or 3 points, aspect. I love that aspect of it. I don't know how I feel yet about the kickoff rule with having those guys so close together. I understand why, A, the safety factor, and B, you want to see if returns can make a bigger have a bigger impact in games. So I'm not totally against. It's just odd to see them so close together and have to wait. Just because the concept, I guess, is just so foreign. I haven't gotten used to it. I obviously can see the benefits in that. I think more than I look, some of these guys are going to make enough of an impact that they're going to end up signing futures deals, and maybe 1, 2, or 3 of them end up actually contributing to a team. I've always been a fan of going way back to the old, World League and all like that. Really enjoyed the minor league kind of aspect. I don't know if we'll ever get back to that again, where certain players are properties of certain teams, like it was years ago. Obviously, James Harrison spent time, went through that route, and several other players did as well too. So I don't know if we're close to a reality of that happening, but just XFL and really USFL, kind of lumped into them there. I think just different things that you can try in the game or something that I think you could see carry over to the NFL and make the NFL. They've got to find a way to move these games along just a little bit faster, for starters, right? I mean, to have 8 minutes of airtime gone trying to figure out what a catch is still,
right.
But
do they need to? You're still going to watch the game. I'm still going to watch the game, no matter how long these replays
right,
take.
But I think they want the more casual observer. They need to move it along more. If they want to make their numbers even better, that's how they would go about doing it.
Yeah, I think it's certainly something that they always want to improve upon. You want these games to be more streamlined and not, be so broken up by all these interruptions. But their viewership is ridiculous. But point taken for sure. And the XFL, the good thing the XFL is doing is there's actually, and I don't know the exact details, but there's a partnership to some degree with the NFL where they're working with in terms of these new rules and health and safety innovations. And so when you have the NFL kind of partnered with you, it's going to hopefully create more stability, because the biggest problems with these leagues are financially, it is expensive to have a football league. And usually these teams run out of money and they're hemorrhaging money, and it's just really tough to do. Attendance is never fantastic, and just trying to generate revenue is a big problem. And so if you can have the NFL kind of maybe support you in some sense, and the NFL wants to see you succeed, that's probably going to be a good thing for your league. And so we'll see. It seemed like a good first week overall. And I think some of these innovations in terms of,
do you think the standard extra point should be a thing of the past?
Well, you're talking to Danny Smith forever over here.
Right.
So no, I want to see that. I want my kickers to be able to kick. I understand it.
Should they move the extra point back then?
I think it's fine where it is in the NFL. Ask Dallas if extra points are easy this year. It doesn't feel like that. But I could certainly see the NFL in 5-10 years move to eliminate extra points, and we're going to have what the XFL is doing right now with kind of different points depending on where the ball is spotted. I could certainly see that being a thing in the future.
What about the kickoff and those kind of things?
Yeah, I could see the kickoff. I think in that health and safety initiative and always expanding kind of idea the NFL has, that could eventually become a thing. It could be eliminated someday entirely. I could just see that, being the way the NFL addresses kickoffs by just not having them a decade plus from now. So yeah, we'll see. I think the XFL is going to again kind of be that feeder league, that test tube baby, to just see what works, what doesn't work in the NFL. Will kind of watch it and take what they like from what the XFL is doing.
Yeah, it seems like we have this discussion now every year about this time, and
right.
I would like to see some. I think they get even more loyalty to fan loyalty to some of these teams if it became like, I don't know, 15 players from each team or have property rights, to an NFL team or something like that. Obviously, there would have to be some sort of monetary reasons to do that, to help, for some of these XFL and USFL teams to benefit from it monetarily. I would imagine, from the parent NFL club. But
right.
I would like to see something along those lines where, all right, well, you spent the year on the practice squad, and we signed you to a futures deal, and you can go, we assign you to go play for this team,
Yeah, I guess the two issues I have with that is if you're trying to get team or getting if you want fans to watch and tune into your XFL team, it can be harder to do that if you're constantly having all this roster turnover while your good players are going to the NFL and you're just trying to create, some sort of identity with your fan base of this is one of our top stars and he's going to be a star for 5 years, going to play for our team. That's never going to happen if he's going to just get tilted up to the NFL. I think the other issue the NFL might look at, and I know that they've signed some of these guys who played in some of these spring leagues, is can you have a bunch of guys that play football all year round and expect their bodies to be good in December and January and that kind of thing? And there's value to those guys not playing and just working out, and then they're ready to go and they're fresh come training camp. So, is that sustainable? That's a question mark.
Right. And look, a high percentage of those guys aren't going to make it anyway, but
sure.
I don't know if you went to some of these guys and say, look, if it meant playing year round for you to end up, on a 3-year contract or something, is it something that you'd be willing to? Some of these guys will do anything.
Oh yeah. The players will be all for it. I think the teams would sit there and say, you want to, invest in this guy long term because his body never gets to rest. And some of these guys have worked. The Cowboys, who was the Cowboys guy? Turpin? I forget what his name is, but I mean, he had a really strong year in Dallas. So some of these guys can work, but offensive lineman playing all year round, is he going to be fresh come January? I doubt it.
Look, I'd rather watch one of these games like I watched last night instead of watching that NBA All-Star game.
The Celebrity All-Star game actually wasn't terrible. I didn't watch it. I just saw highlights, but DK Metcalf is a freak, and that was just kind of fun to watch him. The number one goal that all these feeder leagues, these spring leagues have to have is obviously beyond just being financially healthy, decent quarterback play. If your quarterback play sucks, it's a really hard league to watch. And so trying to figure out how do you do that, the NFL has their own issues with finding good quarterback play. That's a problem. Let me ask you just one specific question. I know that none of us have the answer to that, but Martavis Bryant playing for the Vipers, kind of his first professional football since, he's bounced around quite a bit, but in a long time. Will Bryant ever even make a return, be on an NFL roster again in any capacity? Yeah,
I would have to say no at this point.
Okay.
Would be my guess. Look, you even have who's the other kid that played last night for that had the drug issues in the NFL?
Josh Gordon?
Gordon, and he kind of looked like a little bit of a shell of his former self too.
Right. Although Gordon kept coming back to the league. It's crazy that Gordon did get a bunch of chances, and Bryant got his chances, but Gordon got more. I assume if Bryant's playing in this league, I imagine he has some aspirations to want to get back in the NFL. I don't even know where he's at in reinstatement and all the pitfalls that he's had, but I imagine it's a thought if he's back here playing in the XFL.
Man, how old is he even? He's 31 now.
Yeah, but mileage is pretty low. It's been not working that much the last couple of years.
And, it just Le'Veon Bell just turned 30 or 31 a couple of days ago as well, too. Where's the time gone,
Yeah, no, he's in his whole boxing thing. If the NFL would let him back in, I think Bryant would do, and I think some team would take a chance, even if it's just a training camp, 90-man roster. Let's see what this guy's got. Yeah, he's 31, but the dude's barely played football, so he's got 28-year-old legs. The weed is now essentially legal in the NFL. You're not going to get suspended for it, so that's not a concern. I think a team would give him a shot.
I just wonder. Look, it's hard enough to get one of these leagues to stick. Is it going to come down to either XFL or the USFL? I would like to see one of them stick. I just don't know if there's going to be enough to support. And always the first week is hard to judge because there's always this synergy related to it.
Mm-hmm.
Look, they had a great rambunctious crowd there in Washington, throwing the lemons and the beer snake and that was actually fun to see.
Yeah.
It looked like that. At least that one game and that one game only, it looked like the fans were really enjoying that. So obviously the more weeks that you get into it, the football has to be good enough to sustain the viewership.
Absolutely. I will say in my very small-minded amateur read of the situation, I think the XFL has a better shot than the USFL for two reasons. One, that partnership with the NFL, and two, they have The Rock, and the USFL does not have The Rock. When you have kind of that celebrity guy that can help, create headlines and noise and promote things, that's always a good thing to have in your corner.
All right, so we'll kind of our yearly conversation related to that. We'll see if we're still talking about it much a couple of weeks from now once the combine and free agency and obviously the draft get closer.
And I'm with you. I want NFL Europe back. Bring back the Rain Fire. Bring back all those teams. That was perfection to me. Did they play at the same time as the NFL? Was that a fall league as well, or was that a spring ball?
Man, I don't even remember if it.
How do we find the Rain Fire schedule? I think it was at the same time. Yeah, I have to look. No, it looks like it was in June, in July. Wait, no, this doesn't make sense. This is something else.
I'd had to go back. It'd been too many years for me to remember exactly.
How do we find this? Jim Tomsula is coaching the Rain Fire right now, which I didn't know. That's apparently something that's happening. Anyway, but that was to me the ideal thing because it was a true feeder league, and again, James Harrison, being one of those. Actually, who was that was something else, but yeah, James Harrison being one of those top names to play there.
All right.
What else do we have here, Dave? I think that's all that I had. Anything else that you want to talk about? Anything else that's on your mind after your vacation? I
didn't get to listen to the episode yet, but what did you guys think about? I wrote about Chase Winovich the other day, and I think Jonathan Heitritter kind of tacked on another kind of semi-related article about guys that the Steelers have had past interest in through the pre-draft process. I mean, a guy like Chase Winovich makes a lot of sense if you could get him cheap enough, which I would imagine that would be the case at this point.
Yeah, I think Josh and I were open to the idea. Should be pretty cheap, bring him in. Does that preclude this team from drafting somebody? No, I don't think you're arguing that case either. It's just
in fact, right at the start of that article, it wouldn't hurt my feelings to see them do both. And right. You and I have talked about that outside linebacker room. It seems like 3 consecutive off seasons now about how it needs to be deeper. I would like to see them add, a player better than a Malik Reed, right. And on top of it, invest. And look, they went out and got Quincy Roche back in the fold this offseason. We'll see what happens there. But it wouldn't hurt my feelings to obviously see them throw another draft pick at this position too. Because look, you're going to need somebody to play special teams. We'll see what happens with the contract of Alex Highsmith later on this summer. But they've got. We saw the impact of losing a guy like TJ Watt. Obviously you're not going to, you don't want, you better be prepared to handle such a situation of losing one of your starters, a lot better than the team was in position to do so this past season here. So look, are the better years for Chase Winovich behind him at this point? Possibly. I mean, he has struggled with the hamstring injuries the last couple seasons. Be interesting to see what could happen if he got a full healthy season, and be able to play, 200, 300 snaps at most along those lines. Does he have enough where he could give you, something on 1 or 2 of the special teams units? That's always something that has to be taken in consideration. And look, even if they didn't go him specifically, I think one of the guys that, Jonathan Heitritter has mentioned, and a guy that I had my eye on, several years ago too, that, and Andrew Van Wink. Obviously another Wisconsin product there. That guy's probably not as solid, not as big of a body edge rusher run defender, but he's held his own, since coming into the NFL. More than anything, he's a guy that you definitely, I don't think, would mind being out there on special teams. So could it be a situation where it's like a Chase Winovich or a Van Ginkel? I think it's possible.
Yeah, I think having that veteran guy to come in and compete, I've talked about as much as anybody, the need to add depth. It's really been woeful since trading Melvin Ingram. I guess the issue with Winovich is, and he's got some decent tape, he's a good hustle player, but 1 sack over the last 2 years. I know there's been some injuries in there, but is that guy gonna be a number 3 outside linebacker? I mean, is that where he can be for your team? Maybe, but the production recently has been pretty light.
Right. He has missed a handful of games with that hamstring too. So, I mean, now he did. I went back and took a quick peek of his tape. His best play last year came in those last 4 games when he was finally seemingly more healthy,
Right.
And I think his sack came within that time frame as well too. So those other games, I think he really was battling through that. And you even go back to the year before that, missed a handful of games with the hamstring as well too. So the hamstring is going to be one of the big questions with him, and the fact that his market value should be depressed anyway. You know, so it's not like you'd have a lot invested in him, but had I told you, and obviously you don't know this would be the case, but had you had 100% healthy Chase Winovich last year versus 100% healthy Malik Reed, which one would you have taken?
Well, that's a layup. I'll take Winovich.
Right. And look, if they sign him, do you throw the parade? No, but based on what this team has done when it has come to the outside linebacker position the last couple of years, outside of going out and getting a guy like, Melvin Ingram that unfortunately you couldn't keep, and I still think there's a good shot that you end up signing Highsmith to a contract extension later this offseason. They just need to try to do a better job with the available cap money they have to throw at it to get themselves in a better position to handle a guy missing 1, 2, 3 games in Watt or Highsmith.
Right. They need some options. They need some flexibility. They didn't really have that last year, and that certainly impacted them.
And obviously, it's easy to draw the lines back to people that they've had interest in the past, and Winovich is one of those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So a good suggestion, and certainly a name to keep an eye on once free agency starts in just a couple weeks from now. It's coming up in about 3 weeks, so right around the corner. All right, Dave, any other things you want to talk about, or do you want to get to some reader emails and close out today's show?
Yeah, I think we can get to see what's going on in the email machine here. Let me pull that up real quick here. Let's see. Joe Marone says, hey there, Dave and Alex. I'd like to hear your opposing reasons, if you have them, and I'm going to assume you do, on why teams, and more specifically the Steelers, don't try to package a large group of picks like rounds 5, 6, and 7, and maybe even round 4 in some fashion to move way up into rounds 3 and 4 to try to target players that are more shoe-in starters and then hit undrafted players hard for depth role players. He says, I'd much rather have 3 or 4 much more solid players than some deep draft guys who rarely have impacts. He says the Brett Kiesels are rare. Sometimes I get sticking with your lot, but teams like Houston need a lot more than us and can maybe stand to drop back and have a larger pool they need to sift through. He says, I await your response. Joe from Queens. Look, I mean, you could flip this argument too, though, with a team like Houston. You say, well, they need a lot more so they could stand to have to drop back and have more of those say round 5, 6, or 7 players too. But if you're looking at it from a perspective of, okay, well, they need more mud to throw up on the wall. The argument still stands that what usually comes out of those picks anyway. So is there a good door? Look, if you like my viewpoint on this is just cut and dry across the board. If you like a player so much, then if it meant, move, and I'm talking more middle round, 3rd, 4th, 5th, round player. If you like him a lot and you think he can be that guy and become a starter, then you should try to go up and get him. Now, that said, you look back to what happened with Loudermilk a couple years ago. That seemed to be a more, well, he has the right body type,
Mm-hmm.
So that, but I mean, let's not also forget that this team moved up a couple. What did they give up to move up a couple spots, skip Mason Rudolph a couple of years ago?
Yeah, they moved up. I think it was about 4 spots. They jumped the Bengals. I forget what they gave up specifically. It was a late round pick, though. Sure.
And it's easy to judge these things years later, right? But if you like a guy round 3, 4, 5, let's say round 3 or 4, I think where Joe's argument seems to be, yeah, you should try to go get him. Now, you don't want to overpay for it either, and that's something the Steelers will probably never do is overpay. But I mean, if you like a guy and you think that's your guy and he can become a starter, then I think you should move up. And it'll be interesting to see if this team is more apt to trade up or trade back, or you don't know what's being offered. It's an impossible question to kind of, we'll be asked this, 80 different ways between now and the draft. Should the Steelers trade up or trade down or what have you? And those things are so hard to predict because you don't know what's being offered out there. And there's probably a handful of teams out there too that probably wouldn't want to trade with the Steelers, in division or whatnot, even though it has, happened. There's so many variables involved that we don't know about that it's impossible to give anything other than just a speculatory answer on.
When somebody asks me, and as you said, we're going to get a million of these questions probably tonight in our live stream, be at our live stream tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern time. When somebody asks, should the Steelers trade up or trade down? I will say maybe, because I don't know. I mean, maybe. I mean, there's reasons that depending on the board, depending on what the offer is, depending on your roster, depending on free agency, depending on a million other factors, the strength of that particular position group in this class, maybe. You can't say yes or no until it's actually draft day. I will say, just talking about Pittsburgh specifically and Kevin Colbert, they did this a lot, including with Loudermilk, including with Mason Rudolph, Shamarko Thomas years back. They traded up for him, mid-round kind of guy. Didn't they trade up for, was it Alameda Tiamu? Did they trade up for him back when? I think in the third round. That was also did not work out well. Actually, there's a pattern happening here when they trade up. Usually for guys that didn't end up being all that impressive, except for first round guys, not Devin Bush, but Holmes and Troy Polamalu. But think about Joe Schobert. Think about Avery Williamson. Think about those guys. Malik Reed trading not for in the draft, but trading late day 3 capital for quote unquote more proven NFL players. And so there's been a lot of times where Pittsburgh hasn't had a lot of day 3 capital, including this year, because they've dealt those picks. Now sometimes compensation picks become the calculation. They assume they're going to get some stuff back, and that allows them to be more flexible. But I would say Colbert was actually pretty aggressive trading day 3 picks, sometimes for prospects, but also sometimes for actual veteran players. So I think it's a strategy this team has employed quite often towards the end of Kevin Colbert's career.
I wonder if now, with Colbert out of the picture, if you might see more aspect of, look, we're not zeroed in. We have 4 or 5 guys at this one spot, let's say round 4, that we could live with. We would be more open to entertaining, acquiring some more picks to get one of those 3 or 4 players that we know that we're going to get.
Yeah, I would say, we'll have to see. Again, maybe, but I think Weidl and Kahn will be more open to trading down just because Kevin Colbert almost never traded down. And right now you do have that big void between the 4th round and your first of 2 picks in the 7th round. No pick in the 5th, no pick in the 6th. That's a pretty long wait. And so trading down to get a pick there would make sense. Kevin Colbert only traded down, 3 times his entire tenure, and that's any round, only once in the first round, and his last trade down occurred in 2010. So just based on the math and the odds alone.
Was that the Mike Wallace year?
In 2010?
When was the Mike
was
Wallace?
That a year before? I think 2010 was they traded down with Denver at the end of the 2nd round. I think the Broncos took like Richard Quinn, a tight end who did nothing for Denver. I forget what Pittsburgh got out of that deal.
Didn't they get the offensive lineman and then that didn't stick, that went to the Bills, and then
Urbic?
Urbic. Wasn't that
I don't remember the details. I know 2010 was the last time they did it. I want to say it was Denver. Maybe that happened a year or 2 earlier. We're going down.
Okay, that was the 2009 draft that I'm thinking about there with Urbic. And then wasn't that also the same year that Mike Wallace, let's see here, the Steelers that year obviously had Ziggy Hood in the first round. They traded their 2nd round pick at 64 to Denver, and they drafted Richard Quinn there. And then they had a couple of 3rd round picks then at that point that they went Urbic at 79 overall, then Mike Wallace at 84 overall. And they also had another 3rd round pick that year, went to Keenan Lewis at
Okay,
96 overall.
Together, we pieced it together. Just took us a minute. Yeah, 2010, the last trade down, it was with Arizona. It was, I'm trying to look at the details here.
Oh, that was the whole, wasn't that was that the McFadden?
Yes,
here?
It was Pittsburgh trading a fifth to Arizona for cornerback Bryant McFadden and a 6th-round pick who turned out to be Antonio Brown.
Right.
And the team did trade up for Alameda Tamu, by the way.
Okay.
And that was a massive mistake. So.
I mean, look, you could go through this year by year. And once again, it's the type of thing that we get asked about quite a bit during every offseason. It's impossible to give an exact answer, because you don't know, what group of players maybe they might be focusing on. You don't know what's coming in as far as trade offers. And, I guess just the question should be, should they overpay to move up to get a player they like? And I'll leave it at this. If there's a player out there and, people say, well, they damn sure like Devin Bush, but, they took a shot at him. It was a guy that they liked, and they moved up and gave up the draft capital to move all the way up to make sure they got him, and they did, and it obviously didn't work out very well. But I mean, I will never criticize them for going up to go get a player that they want until 4 years after the fact.
Yeah, no, fair point. Yeah, sorry, Joe. I think I stopped answering your question a while ago, so I apologize. I took us down this giant rabbit hole. Yeah, I would just take a little bit of issue with the language. I know it's just in the email, and you're not trying to be like super precise about it, but the idea of trading up for a shoe-in, the NFL draft, there are no shoe-ins. Again, right. Aaron Curry wants the safest player in the draft. Not so. And as the names we're talking about, Rudolph and Shamarko Thomas and Tamu, guys that were higher round picks, but didn't really, get great return on investment. So to me, depends on the board.
Maybe is the correct answer, right?
Yeah, maybe it's the long and short is maybe is the correct answer.
All right. Pastor Joe Green writes in, Dave and Alex, if you were given the option to sign Zach Gentry or Jesse James to a contract with similar dollars in time frame, who would you choose and why? Is there another free agent that you would prefer? Thank you for the stellar comment. I mean, look, just in their present state and form right now, this minute, if we're playing Zach Gentry to Jesse James, apples for apples, similar dollars in time frame and all, I think I would take Zach Gentry because he's been in the system, he's younger, yada yada. I'm not throwing a parade for either one of them. I'll tell you that at this point. And he says, is there another free agency? I haven't really looked at the free agent at tight ends out there. Look, I had here's my thought on the tight end position. And I've brought this up several times. Now, do I think they're going to be in a position where this ends up with like a Michael Mayer or whatnot, in the first round? Probably not, because you've got a number one, obviously, in Pat Freiermuth. Here's my thoughts. And there's nothing wrong with bringing Zach Gentry back, but if you do and it's over X amount of dollars, then you're not going to go another route there. Mm-hmm. I just feel that the current state of that tight end room, especially from a run blocking aspect, could stand to be improved, period. End of story. Now, does that mean the big kid Darnell Washington out of Georgia? I don't have a good, it kind of feels like maybe third round for him from where we sit right now. I don't know, maybe late second round. I don't know where his exact draft spot ideal draft spot would be right now. I will just say this. They could use a better blocking tight end. I view Zach Gentry as a guy that's at his ceiling personally now. And I would be careful with the amount of, if I did re-sign him, the guaranteed money that I give. I would not go out and I would not sign Jesse James in lieu of Zach Gentry. I'll answer that part of the question there. But I contend that this team should do everything in their power to make the depth of that tight end room better, just in the same breath that we talked about the outside linebacker depth when it comes to that room.
Sure, that's fair. To answer the question, I'm with you, Dave. I would take Gentry over James for the reasons you outlined. The question becomes, what do you want the role of your number 2 tight end to be in your offense? For some offenses, that is an integral part. Guy's going to be playing 600 some snaps, going to be a big part of the pass game, part of the play action game, part of the run game, obviously. In Pittsburgh, it's been a little bit less than that. It's kind of more that pure blocking role. Gentry has that unique size at 6'7", 6'8", that can match up against these big 4-3 ends. And I think
but he's not great at it.
I thought he was better in 2021 than I thought he had a kind of a down year this past year. I'm with you there.
Okay.
But he does have that size, and it's hard to replace a guy that's 6'8" just for that size aspect alone. The guy that's 6'3" might be a good blocker, but when he's going against a 6'5", 300-pound defensive end, it's a matchup that guy's probably going to lose more often than not, no matter how good of a blocker, no matter how technical of a blocker he is. Other names, I just started to do kind of my Steelers free agency wish list. This is not the actual list. I'm just writing down names that kind of strike me. I did have James as one of them just because he's that former Steeler. If Gentry does go, you could see that happen. Also mentioned Drew Sample and your favorite Foster Moreau, but Sample and Moreau a bit smaller than Zach Gentry.
Right, and I don't think 1-for-1 there's much of a gain. And then look, I think you can get a little bit more out of Foster Moreau in the passing game. But 1-for-1 as a blocker, probably a pretty even trade off there. Yeah,
Moreau wouldn't be that. That would kind of change the offense, the scope of that number 2 tight end of Bay. He would be more than just a Gentry pure blocker. If you wanted your offense to be that, again, it's a question of what you want your offense to look like. Sample is kind of more that true and blue blocking type, but he's also a bit smaller. He's about 6'4.5". So he doesn't have the size that Gentry possesses.
I'll just end with this. I would like to see that tight end room be better this offseason, if at all possible.
Do you think Zach Gentry gets re-signed?
I mean, I think he does, but I'm not going to be one hollering for a parade to be thrown if it happens.
You won't be grilling and chilling.
No,
Zach Gentry gets re-signed.
Look, it's going to be hard. Those two love people. And here's the thing. When we saw Jesse James leave a couple of years ago, right? And we've seen a couple other tight ends lately. Is the tight end market one of those ones that's just a little bit overinflated?
It was when James got paid. He got paid so much money, and I still don't know how that happened. And that was a big whiff by Detroit.
If you give me an opportunity to get a guy and obviously the draft comes after free agency too, so that's another thing to consider. But I would be more apt to, draw a line in the sand when it comes to a guy with Gentry as far as market value goes. And if I can't get him at this price or below, then I turn my attention to the draft with him. And then if I don't get it settled the way I want to in the draft, then I look at the remaining guys out there that way.
Sure, that's fair. I think the reality probably is Gentry gets re-signed for like a 2-year, $7.5 million deal, and Pittsburgh calls it a day.
I think that might be a little bit. I
think it's too much.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that won't be the price. I'm just saying I feel he's hit his ceiling.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, what number would you want to put on
it? About $1.5 million a year.
Yeah, I can say that. Yeah. But like you said, the tight end market can be a little wonky, and he's still pretty young. So I'm just kind of making up numbers, but something like that.
And look, has he held on longer than I thought he would? Yeah, absolutely. But I really feel with watching what he did last season, it feels like it feels like you're just settling for if you bring him back, and in doing so, it's hard to imagine that you're going to get much more out of him in the role that he played from a quality snap standpoint if you do re-sign him.
Fair. Yeah, he's going to be just a pure blocking tight end. 90% of his, that's 90% of what he does. The thing is, though, if Pittsburgh, and they do like him for his size, right? They do like how big the guy is. If you lose him, how many 6'8" tight ends are out there for you to go replace him with?
Right, but all I care is what the end result is on the field.
No, I know. But I mean, again, if you're a 6'4", 245-pound tight end, you might be really good technique of a blocker and have good leverage. If you're facing Cam Jordan, you're facing, Sam Hubbard, it's a tough battle to win. It's just, mass.
Okay. But it's just one of those things, along with the outside linebacker room, that I really think they could stand to make that room, those two rooms, better this offseason.
Yeah, fair enough. We shall see.
All right, Brian Tellini writes in, good morning, Dave and Alex. Really enjoyed listening to the roundtable shows. My question, I think most of you guys would agree there are better odds in drafting a wide receiver this year than not. That being said, how important do you feel versatility is for any wide receiver we could potentially be drafting? Obviously, there will be some competition in the slot, but do you want to be looking at someone that can play outside too? If Calvin Austin is the clear-cut winner of the slot and Boykin is brought back as our special teams ace, don't we want somebody who could back up multiple positions? Look, I think in today's NFL, it's more of an advantage the more you can move those guys around, all of them. And I think the Steelers have shown that they're not afraid to move some of these guys around. Now, obviously, some of these guys are better in one position, over another one. Deontay Johnson's a much more better utilized guy as the backside X than he would probably be as the Z or in the slot and all like that. So here's my view on the wide receiver position when it comes to the Steelers and the draft. And remember, as much as we like to think that we know about Calvin Austin at this point, we don't know anything.
Mm-hmm.
We're still working off of what limited amount of stuff Alex got to see in training camp, and then obviously the kid's college tape. And I think even Tom Mead was the one that broke him down. Said this is a kid that played both the slot and the Z, and maybe even a little bit of X when he was at Memphis there. How often are you going to use a guy like him, honestly, outside as a Z, though, plain and simple? Because of that size.
Not often. Occasionally, but he did a little bit outside work in camp. But yeah, not often. I mean, as you said, I think you hit the nail on the head. These guys have to be versatile. We're kind of past the AB days of he's the X receiver, and that's how it's going to be. And we're pretty static overall. Guys have to move around. And so they as you said, there's always best fit in primary roles, but the secondary roles become more important. And so you got to be able to move around, because if one guy can't move, then you can't move the other guy, because they have to both be able to shift and move around. Otherwise, everyone becomes static. So versatility is important.
And look, Gunnar Olszewski gets the Try Hard Award somewhere. If there were such an award last season for the Steelers, when asked, it's not his fault. He was asked to do some things that probably don't best fit his style there. But I mean, you can do better than that. My view on the wide receiver position too is, man, it kills me to see them have to carry 6 at the position.
Yeah, I mean, I think last year they kind of were running out of things to do with Gunnar, and then you had Steven Sims, and the roles and styles were kind of redundant. But you got to call that the Ray McLeod role or award, because that's what Ray was trying to do, 2 years ago. So didn't work out well. I mean, I would say that I think slot is the biggest primary need, because it's really kind of a void there. You have your outside receivers in Johnson and Pickens. So, ideally I want a slot guy, but then of course, the more that they can offer beyond just playing in the slot, the better.
If they do draft a wide receiver this year, in the first, let's say 4 rounds, I would like to think that guy's primary would be more of a bigger slot, at least bigger than Calvin Austin. But on top of that, have some versatility aspect of him coming out of college where he can be moved around a little bit.
Yeah, I think in terms of who those guys might be, just spitballing, Parker Washington from Penn State, Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think makes a lot of sense from Ohio State. Jaden Reed from Michigan State, I think also is a pretty strong fit. Those are some names that are pretty attractive to me playing in the slot next year.
Right. And the odds are good that they will draft one, because there had been too many years dating back to when Kevin Colbert came along that they haven't drafted at least one.
Right. I would expect them to draft one this year.
Within the first 4 rounds?
Maybe. I'll give you that answer. I don't know. Okay. Probably, but
it's a little bit. It feels like it's a little bit deeper class. At least once you get past the top heaviness of it.
Well, I don't think it's super top heavy word, isn't it? Like, it's kind of lacking those couple of superstars, but I think there's some good depth to the class.
Okay, Ben Steltz writes in, hi, Dave and Alex, longtime listener to the show here, first time emailing. Just love everything you guys do. Thank you for that, Ben. I know it's better if these are short, so here it goes. Would you consider bringing Bud Dupree back if he is cut by the Titans due to his large cap number back on a Miles Jack, Akella Witherspoon type of deal? He says, appreciate the hard work you guys continuously put in. Looking forward to another great season for 2023. If we're talking, because you're talking two different price points here when you're talking about Miles Jack and Akella Witherspoon. You're talking Miles Jack at $8 million. I would say absolutely not for Bud Dupree on an $8 million deal. I think where it becomes more entertainable would be on more of a Witherspoon $4 million type of deal. But even so, if you sign Bud Dupree, you're not going to get him on the field for any special teams. I don't think. So then it becomes a guy just sitting there waiting to play, 12 to 20 snaps. Obviously, you want a guy more experienced out there. I just feel for what the money, and I just got done talking about it. Boy, I'd like to see this outside linebacker room be improved. I still think unless Bud Dupree is willing to play for vet minimum, I think I'd pass on that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot of immediate interest there. I understand, good scheme fit, know this guy pretty well. It's just, he's how old now? How old's Bud Dupree? I know he's not super old, but
I mean, he's got to be right there at 28, 29, 30, right?
Yeah, and he's had the knee issues and never seemed to get. He's actually
he is 30. Wow.
30.
Once again, we're in. Where's the time gone? Aspect.
Yeah, so 30 with the knee injuries.
That's
really
too much. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd probably pass.
I would definitely pass for him for anything over the minimum. And once again, I just talked about how I'd like to see that room. But I mean, he is a guy that would be pigeonholed into being on your roster. And obviously you'd want you want to alleviate any playing time you can with TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, but for the price it would probably cost versus the amount of snaps that the perfect plan would include him playing, I would pass, I think.
Yeah, they just got to draft a guy. They draft so well. The free agents have not worked out as well. And even if they do work, they're short term, 1 year, if that kind of things. And by the next year, you're asking yourself the same question. How do we get depth? Go draft a guy. Like Pittsburgh doesn't miss at that position. So just go draft somebody on day 2, have that guy on there on a cheap 4-year deal, and you'll be good to go.
Right. I agree. David Ricard says, as always, thank you for the work. You're easily best source of Steelers news out there. Now that Brandon Hunt has moved on to the Eagles, are the Steelers eligible for a comp pick for his departure? That would be a no. I think I missed the news where he left, and I'm hoping you can provide some additional context there. I know he was a favorite for the GM position last year, which ultimately went to Omar. It's almost like we swapped Hunt for Andy Weidl. I guess that's one way to look at it, right?
That's basically what happened. Yeah, he left shortly after Khan and Weidl were named GM and assistant GM last year, and so we knew that as soon as Khan, got the job over Hunt was gonna leave. Didn't know where he was gonna go. The Eagles had expressed interest, I don't know, about 5-6 years ago. So he's back. And what is his title? I forget what exactly his title is. Director of Scouting is what the Eagles are calling him. He was at the Senior Bowl. Mike Tomlin talked with him, so it doesn't seem to be like there's any hard feelings. But Hunt left shortly, so that would have been, I guess, June of last year.
He says, on a personal note, I'd like the slightly less old school approach Omar has taken, even in the limited sample size we have. He says, I especially like the extension of Deontay Johnson earlier in the offseason than we were accustomed to under Colbert. He says, I'm an optimist, so take that for what it's worth. Look, I mean, it will be interesting to see how they handle some of these guys once they immediately get past the free agency aspect of it. Obviously, free agency comes first, then draft, and then right after that would probably be the prime time to look to see. I mean, really, when you're talking about guys that are prime for extension this offseason, it's Alex Highsmith, plain and simple. That's it. That's the list, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the only name that I can see.
So, I'm with Dave in the aspect I would like to see them get this done earlier rather than later.
Sure, I would too. It just depends. It takes two to tango, and how well does Highsmith's agent want to get a deal done, and are they going to kind of wait because maybe some other pass rusher gets paid later in the summer, and that'll increase the market value for Highsmith, set another benchmark? I don't know. So it seems to be what Con wants to do, and I'm all for that, but we'll just have to wait and see.
And I think Dave records the other thing, interesting aspect to see is how quickly maybe they do some of these offseason restructures of guys like Watt and Minka, just from that's interesting, because normally they generally, unless there's a roster bonus involved in here, they normally, those things dip into training camp time and all. So it'll be interesting to see if they just go ahead and get those knocked out earlier than they have in past.
Right. One other just quick aside about Andy Weidl, interesting note that I know Matthew wrote up today from The Athletic, that apparently Weidl makes his board not with grades. Usually we hear about, there's a grade assigned to a player, but Weidl has it based on a role, like day one starter, potential role player, backup, etc. So that's apparently how Weidl sets his board. That's going to be his role in Pittsburgh, what he did in Philadelphia to set the draft board. And then, everyone kind of works off of that. So one difference appears to be that.
All right, what are we, about an hour and 10 in?
Let's say hour 15 or so. So yeah, that's a good show back. Glad to have you back on the show here, Dave. I still think you went on the darkness retreat with Aaron Rodgers. I'm still not convinced, because you left on Wednesday, right? Mm-hmm. And Aaron Rodgers did his Tuesday with Pat McAfee, then I think was leaving right around the next day for the darkness retreat. So I'm just saying.
I would be so lucky to do one of those. I have a problem with forcing myself to relax a little bit there. So maybe I need to do more research into whatever a darkness retreat is.
All right. We'll talk to Aaron Rodgers. He'll fill you in.
All right. Good show. We will be back at it on Wednesday. We're going to try to effort a guest maybe on the Wednesday show. By then, hopefully the Steelers will have made official the Aaron Curry addition to the coaching staff. We'll see if there's any other new coaches that we'll be talking about. Then obviously we'll be getting more and more into free agency talk and draft talk as we move forward. The combine's right around the corner. I've already got some of the tracking sheets set up for that way early than I usually do. So excited about that coming, especially with it looking like we're going to have a couple of contributors in Indianapolis this year to cover it this year. So who knows what will be. Wednesday's a long way away when it comes to the news cycle. So in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast at gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, go to SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button upright navigational bar. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button upright navigational bar. Thanks again to Josh Carney for sitting in for me a couple of shows there as well, too. And until Wednesday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.